Earlier today, I saw a list of every single Yoshi game and its sales, and I was very surprised to see Yoshi Crafted World at number 3, fairly high up there. It significantly outsold Woolly World. It significantly outsold pretty much every other Yoshi game other than DS and Island, and I believe DS was pretty close. Like DS was a huge success when it came out. So I found it very interesting that Crafted World sold as much as it did because this is clearly the Switch effect at work where every single Nintendo franchise is selling significantly more than it otherwise would have. But considering the way people talk about this game and how people remember it, you would think this would be one of the big stinkers on the platform. Like the way people talk about it, like they act like this game shot their dog or something. Like this came out in like early 2019, just before it became socially acceptable to like the Switch and consider it a success. So it was kind of like that generation's equivalent of, say, Mario Tennis Fever, or even this generation's Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. Like, it's obviously a good game. It's obviously doing very well for itself, but there was a certain like subset of the Nintendo community that really wanted to disrespect this game for some reason. Like I remember like Pro Jared putting it on his like top 10 worst games of the year list. I remember people freaking out about this, and considering how many other games at the time were coming out, um like a lot of games got that treatment, right? I know Arms did, I know Octopath Traveler did, and for the most part, I think a lot of people were like, you know, advocating for other games. And as a result of that, like something like this kind of got lost in the shuffle. This is a game that got a reputation it did not deserve. Like Yoshi's Crafted World is a very solid platformer, right? A sequel to Yoshi's Woolly World from the same developers that fixes a lot of the problems, has a lot of cool, interesting mechanics, way better boss fights, and is overall like a very pleasant experience. Like as a whole, Yoshi's Crafted World is just genuinely really, really good. So why the misconception? Like, why are people so anxious to act as if this game is somehow polarizing or somehow disappointing or somehow bad? For my money, this really is just another example of the inherent bias against 2D platformers. Like, people had this mindset that this game was underwhelming, that it was disappointing, that it wasn't innovative, that it wasn't pushing the genre enough, that it was a kiddie platformer and not a serious game for adults. And they overlooked it for that reason. Like, every single Yoshi game that comes out, and I think Mysterious Book is falling victim to this too, it's inevitably compared to Island. And the immediate response from everyone is that this game is not going to be as good as Island. It's never going to be as good as Island. Island was a masterpiece. Like all these games are just inferior clones of it. And that's not really true. Like when you look at something like Story, that game did really, really well in spite of being so radically different, right? When you look at like Yoshi's Island DS, that game radically different than the original, did very well for itself. And when you look at like Woolly World, when you look at like all these other Yoshi games that have come out, like it, they're not that much worse than Island. Like Island, in a lot of ways, is put on a pedestal. Now, keep in mind, Island is my all-time favorite game, but at the same time, like just because these other Yoshi games aren't as good, or because they don't leave as much of an impact, that definitely doesn't mean they're bad. And it's very interesting looking at Crafted World in particular because the sales numbers are quite a bit tell a quite a bit of a different story than like you might expect. Like the fact of the matter is this game did quite a bit better than like the far more well-received Yoshi's Woolly World. It did better than like Yoshi's New Island. Like it did like fairly well for itself. It's a game that I think kind of transcends its critical reception. Like this was a game that was coming out and people bought it. Kids today aren't going to compare this to Island because they've never played Island. Like for a lot of people, this is their first Yoshi game, and as a result of that, they have a really good time with it. Like if your default response to downplaying a Nintendo game is to compare it to another Nintendo game, especially one in the same series, you've already lost essentially because all that's going to do is that's going to have people going back, discovering the iconic game, realizing how good that game is, and becoming a lifelong fan. Going down the rabbit hole of just this endless amounts of Nintendo content. Like downplaying modern Nintendo games by propping up the classics just inevitably goes in this direction. Crafted World is a very, very interesting game, and because this is like what the industry tried to do. Okay, the industry tried, saying this was a lazy release, that it wasn't very good, that Goodfield didn't know what they were doing, that this was like a massive step down, that this was like, a bad game because it wasn't as good as Island. But the long and short of it is that's not true. Like the long and short of it is like people who played this game came away with very, very positive feelings towards it. Like I myself, I would say the secret final boss, and there is a secret final boss, by the way. The secret true final boss is actually one of the best final bosses in any Nintendo game. Like that thing was brutal. If you've never done it, I highly recommend you check it out. It's like a phenomenal experience. It's phenomenal. But like this is a game that like a lot of people just overlook. And I think that's like the trend with a lot of these Nintendo games now is that every time we get a new one, like whether it's like Mysterious Book or Mario Tennis Fever or Pokepia, you have like entire groups of people saying that like I'm not interested, that's boring, it's not my genre, it looks bad. And then like over time the game develops more and more of a fan base of people who pick it up on a whim and realize just how good it actually is. And it feels like with Mysterious Book coming out, we very well may see like a resurgence of relevancy for Crafted World. This is actually the first time I've talked about the game ever, because I believe when it came out I was still like I was getting started to my first real job, and I was like out of the house a lot. I remember like I played it when I was sent home early one day and just like played through like 6 hours worth of it, listening to Nick Rekieta and Drexel just like bullshit about things for like 6 hours. Like it was a really good time. Like Crafted World was something that like I played and enjoyed for what it was, and then I moved on. But like, and this is something that's like very important to people. Like that's a very normal way to treat a game. Like not everything is going to be a Breath of the Wild moment. Not everything is going to be life changing. Not everything is going to redefine what a video game is or redefine franchises, and that's perfectly fine. And I think that is something that like we do have to take into consideration when it comes to things like this, because if you're criticizing a game simply for not like changing a formula, a formula that's like that works and there's nothing else like it, like what exactly are you being critical of? Like what exactly are you so upset about? Like to me, if you're saying that like you're not into Crafted World, I just assume you're not into Yoshi games in general. And as a result of that, like, why would I take you seriously about anything? Is kind of my mentality on it. Like, this is something that I think should be a lot more well regarded than what it was. Okay, this is a game that did big numbers on Switch. A game that like paved the way for like Goodfield's next game, Princess Peach Showtime, which by the way is way better than this. But a game that was even more hated, by the way, was Princess Peach Showtime. Crafted World was like it's a really interesting situation that Goodfield is in now because they keep putting out all these really interesting, unique Nintendo titles, all these really great takes on the characters, and they keep getting rejected by the masses. And I'm very curious, like, at what point people start like appreciating them for what they do. Like Crafted World, I think in a lot of ways, it's gotten like a lot of flack from people. Like, it's a lot more apathetic. With Princess Peach Showtime, you had like it was more divisive. Like some people loved it and other people were like making things up about it and saying it was bad. But with Crafted World, like it doesn't feel like there's that much of a vocal like fan base for this game. And people mistake that for the game being bad because like well if it was if it was good it would have fans like no it has plenty of fans it has plenty of people who have played the game all the way to the end like the issue is like there's just nothing to talk about and this is like the reality with I think a lot of these Nintendo games like especially the ones that don't have a lot of plot like what exactly are you going to talk about when it comes to a game like this and this is like the big like blind spot when it comes to Nintendo news coverage is that games like this are very popular people love them people buy them people play them and yet like there's not a lot of YouTube coverage on them because there's nothing really to talk about like there's nothing really to like drum up interest in or like fabricate some like narrative or create some conspiracy like again it's just a Yoshi game and people like take that to mean that like it's not good and it's not worth talking about but I would say it's the opposite is that like the people who talk about games for a career are grifters who can't appreciate like something like this like something that actually tries to be a little bit different something that tries to be innovative something that like dared to be a little bit like unorthodox right like something like this is like weird and alien to like the masses like we've seen recently just how much they freaked out about like the release of Tamagotchi Life and like Kirby Air Riders and like this is kind of in the same mold honestly like this game never had anything that like made it stick out from the crowd and as a result of that it led to this like weird misconception that it was a flop when actually it was fairly popular and where we're at right now is we're in this period where people are trying to use this game against Mysterious Book. Mysterious Book is one of those games that's like not being talked about, it's not being addressed, and I think people are going to be very surprised at how well it does. Like considering Yoshi's presence in the movie, like considering like uh how hot like Yoshi is right now, considering like how anxious people are to pick up new Switch 2 games. Like I think in a lot of ways, Yoshi is going to do quite a bit better than most people realize. And it's going to be one of those interesting scenarios if Mysterious Book establishes itself as the best-selling Yoshi game ever. Because Crafted World wasn't quite the best-selling. I think like Island had it beat by like still a million units. But like if Mysterious Book like eclipses Island, like the community is gonna have no choice but to acknowledge it. Like if it's number one, if it outsells the best-selling game in the series, like suddenly it'll seem as if like Nintendo knows what they're doing with Yoshi, as if they finally found their audience and they've finally been able to like sell people on this idea that's been actually pretty controversial since it first came out. Like people forget this, but like when Donkey Kong Country was the big new thing, Yoshi's Island was like derided and mocked for looking the way it did. It really was the Wind Waker of its time, but like over time it became a classic, and I think we're gonna see something similar happen to this to games like Mysterious Book. Is that like if you keep like downplaying games based on like their alleged relevancy online or their popularity or like how much they sell, you're inevitably going to get like blindsided by like a major breakout success. Like Yoshi is way too iconic of a video game character to like languish in like 4 million seller hell forever. Nintendo has like this really fundamental like good understanding of like what these games should be and their target audience, and it's only a matter of time until they really nail it and make something that just blows everyone's socks off. And they are going through like the motions. They are throwing darts at a wall and they're just coming up with like fun, unique, fresh ideas. Crafted World had plenty of great ideas, and it wasn't the best Yoshi game, but like it doesn't need to be. Like people always like complain about like the period between Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild, right? Because Nintendo was doing stuff like Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, like during that period, like people thought Zelda was on the decline, and then out of nowhere, seemingly they put out Breath of the Wild. But that's not so unusual when you think about like how much work goes into these games, and how good they are, and how each major step forward gets them closer to their overall goal. And that's what we're seeing with Yoshi now, is that Nintendo is endlessly perfecting the formula, gaining new fans, and becoming more and more successful.